Okay. Well, from the first hunter gatherers to the central city planners of the ancient world, economic and social models continually evolve. Models that once served the masses tend to coalesce into the condensed power of a few. Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me clearly, or is it just distorted and a mess?
No, it sounds good.
Okay. For whatever reason, I hear it as distorted and a mess. All right, I'm going to start over. All right, take two. From the first hunter gatherers to the central city planners of the ancient world, economic and social models continually evolve. Models that once served the masses tend to coalesce into the condensed power of the few until change gives birth to a new model, one that again serves the masses. Tonight, what are hyper-local economies and how are they relevant to the homestead grown grow model food system? Hey, so you're listening to Homestead Grown Live. This is a weekly live show that will cut down to a podcast and share if you aren't able to attend the live sessions. But tonight, the topic of conversation, if you will, is hyper local economies. Uh, I thought I actually coined this phrase, and it turns out I didn't. So then I thought perhaps I coined at least the meaning of the phrase or had a unique meaning for the phrase. Turns out that's not even true. So perhaps this was somehow injected into my consciousness by reading something from another source. But tonight we're going to talk about hyperlocal economies and specifically how it feeds in to the grow model food system. But first, probably should talk a little bit about what the grow model food system is. So, the grow model food system is really, and actually, what Homestead Grown is all about is uh, helping families grow and source food at scale. So, the idea here was first born at the beginning of the pandemic. I decided, hey, I'm going to go out and grow all of my own food. Everything that we would possibly need to consume, I'm going to grow, whether it be vegetables and fruits, or animals for meat and eggs and cheese and so forth. That's a daunting task, and anyone who has undertaken that task probably knows that, and anyone who's thought about it any length of time probably knows that. So the concept shifted a little bit away from uh, right out of the gate growing everything yourself, which is intimidating and it will be overwhelming, and in many cases that overwhelm will cause failure. So I've shifted that a little bit, and part of that shift also was, I think, the need for communities to start to come back together as opposed to being isolated. So you could live right next to someone and really not know them for years or ever. And considering the conditions of our world, it probably wouldn't hurt to know your neighbors, and it probably wouldn't hurt to have a relationship with your neighbors. So there are four components at the highest level. There are four components of the Grow Model food system. The first component is the plan and production. So the detailed plan required in order to execute all of the tasks that are required in order to grow, source, preserve, store, and cook all of your own food. So that plan is really important. If you have that plan down, then you have a blueprint that you can follow, um, which can make the process a lot easier. Well, actually, make the process possible. So, but the second component is hyperlocal economies, and that's what we're going to focus on here. The idea is that when you identify what you will grow or raise, so whether it's fruits, vegetables, chickens, beef, pork, goat milk, cheese, you name it, you're going to make a list of everything essentially that you need in order to provide all the ingredients that you need to provide food for your family for 1 year. And after you look at that list and you realize that you probably won't be able to do it all yourself, at least at year 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. You're going to say, okay, where can I source these things? And I believe that the best place to source them is as close to you as possible. And so, hence the hyper local. And hyper local actually means even within your own family. So, in our case, we are encouraging our children to establish little micro businesses, if you will, and we will be their customer. So, there's a number of benefits to this. But one of the benefits is obviously the production of that item is outsourced to an in-source. But if you don't have children, or they're not old enough or mature enough or responsible enough to grow or to raise, let's say, a dozen chickens so that you have enough eggs that you require for your week, then you start to look to maybe the neighbor's children and the immediate neighbor, the right next door neighbor, if you will. And if not the children, then the adults there as well, because you may find that there are people that they love to garden, or they love to have their grow chickens, or they have goats or whatever. And so you would source your items from them. And if no one around you grows anything or raises anything, perhaps it's time to talk to others to see if they would be interested. So you start with immediate, and you slowly, I see it kind of as concentric circles, right? So the first circle is myself. What will I produce? And by the way, my wife is on the line as a co-host, so I'm going to take her off of mute and say hi.
Hi, hun.
Hey.
Hey.
So can you hear the fan running in the background?
I cannot.
Okay, good. So I'm just hearing all these sounds. This is our first episode in a very long time. So we used to try to do a daily. Of course, Maria, I think, joined toward the end on Fridays, but we're going to move this to weekly instead of daily because it's just way too much to do every day. But it's been a long time, and so obviously, as you start back up, sorting out sound issues are important. But anyway, welcome.
Hey, thanks.
So feel free to cut in at any time. But again, the idea of the hyper-local economies is really important for a number of reasons. One, you can't do everything yourself, and two, it's important that we forge relationships with our neighbors. And I don't think it's even a bad idea that those relationships have some dependency, so that there's a little bit of dependency from their end and on our end, so that there's a reason beyond we're just neighbors to engage in that relationship, if that makes sense.
Yep. Can I jump in and ask something?
Yep.
So, I mean, I know that we are at a bit of an advantage with having some acreage to work with. What about people that live in neighborhoods and have lots of neighbors, but not as much as far as opportunities for things like raising chickens and
Yeah.
you'd mentioned chickens, so that's the first one that comes to mind. But I know a lot of cities have rules and ordinances about raising poultry, and so how do you work around that? When your neighborhood isn't lending itself well to that kind of endeavor.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is, right, if you can't raise chickens in your neighborhood because of ordinance, then you probably can't raise chickens. But it doesn't mean there isn't something you can do. And I think that's the idea. Getting off the ground is important, and then let momentum and direction carry you forward. So what can you do? If you have just a balcony, can you grow some vegetables in container gardening, and in containers, and produce your own tomatoes? Can you make tomato sauce from those tomatoes? So I think everyone can start somewhere, and start small. And I think that's the idea. that you don't need to accomplish everything. I think if you remember when I first set out, I was just, I'm out there breaking up fields and laying out plots of land to be able to produce everything. It's just so overwhelming that most people won't be able to see it through. We certainly weren't able to see it through, and mostly because I think it was just overwhelming, and we got lost in that. So, if you can raise a half a dozen chickens, and you've never done it before, but you have enough, there's nothing that prevents you from doing it, then give it a try. But if there are regulations and laws and things that are preventing you from doing it, what can you do? There's always something. And that even means that includes adding value to something. So like maybe you're really good at making and you have a recipe for pasta sauce, and so you'll need to source tomatoes from someone else, and maybe that someone else is within the hyper local context. Or as we would talk a little bit more about hyper local and expanding, out and out and out, you're not going to find everything within your immediate neighbors and yourself, and maybe not even within your neighborhood. But what about within your village or your town? So again, the concept is as close to you as possible, and where you can forge relationships. And that could be at a farmer's market. You could find local farmers that produce various things, but then you could purchase those and add value to them for your neighbor. Does that make sense?
It does. That is exactly what I was asking. So
Great. Yeah, so that kind of actually leads into the idea that just I'm a purist, so I would like to produce everything myself. And if I can't produce everything myself, I'd like for my children to produce what I can't produce, so I can purchase from them. And if they can't, then I would prefer to get it from my direct neighbor. But again, it's probably not going to happen for all of us, or even most of us, to be able to do that. So it's okay, I think, to continue to cast those nets wider and wider until, in the end, we are able to produce or source all of our fruits and vegetables and meats and cheeses and so on and so forth from local sources. And now that may mean that we need to cut out buying grapes. I know we're guilty of this one, right? Buying grapes in the middle of winter. Grapes don't grow in winter in Ohio. So we probably won't be eating out of season, and that we would mostly be eating in season, which is, many people will say, is very good for you. Okay, so I wanted to shift to go back and talk a little bit about some of those benefits that, and by the way, hi, Karen. Thanks for joining the show. Appreciate you listening. And hopefully you'll join us, like us and subscribe or whatever it is on Podbean. I think it's follow. And then join us each week. We'd like to see you come back. Okay, so going back to that first circle is self. And I think we need to be realistic. Like I said, it kind of smacked us in the face that we weren't realistic in thinking we could take everything on. But be realistic and say, start small so that you can find success. But then with our children, for instance, our second oldest, we are looking to him to be responsible for the chickens. Now, Maria and I have had chickens on many occasions, and it seems like, the joke is that everything on the planet loves chicken, and they're incredibly difficult to protect, especially if you try to be cage free. And of course, we're organic in everything we do, and try to be cage free to let them live a life of a chicken. But it's difficult. But we turn that responsibility over to our second oldest child, and we will pay him to produce a dozen eggs. And if you think about it, we're going to buy those eggs anyway, and we're going to pay a premium for them at a grocery store or a farmer's market or from a local farmer. Why not pay our son the same amount, perhaps even a little bit more, in order for him to start to understand a good work ethic, to understand animal husbandry, and really to kind of catch that entrepreneurial spirit. This country was founded by entrepreneurs, and we certainly want to cultivate that in our children. And all of the business skills required to run a successful business, um, all of this we can, at the same time as providing food for the family, food that he would consume as well. Um, he can learn life lessons and learn and earn an income. And as he starts to increase his knowledge and experience, he can scale up. And as we reach out to more and more neighbors in our hyper-local economy and start to exchange goods and services, um, he can scale to provide for others. Now, perhaps in our area, we're pretty rural, so keeping chickens is not necessarily an unusual thing. But there are a lot of folks around us that don't, and they buy eggs, and they may very well choose to purchase their cage-free organic eggs from our son, and he can scale that business as far as he wants to scale it. So I think that's important, and the same thing is true with helping and encouraging the same mindset in our neighbors' children. They may not have thought about it, but maybe there's something that we particularly that we would like to source local, and that we could encourage a neighbor child that's old enough and mature enough and responsible enough to um, to listen or to purchase. Maria, am I making sense?
Yeah, I think you are. I mean, I think it's important maybe to share. I mean, I know we jumped right in, but we should probably introduce ourselves and maybe name the ages of our kids. So when we're talking about our second oldest is a 12-year-old. In some families, the second oldest might be 4. So, you
Yeah,
know, to just kind of give some people some reference as far as what in our family, what the expectations are, as it relates to their age. So that's my
yeah, no,
contribution.
good idea. So, yeah, go ahead. You want to do that?
I'm going to let you do it because I'm not sure how much information you want to give out.
Yep. Okay. So I'm Doug, as in I know Doug. And by the way, I know Doug is the at I know Doug is for all of the social media. So Twitter, um, what are the other things? Gab, uh,
Insta.
Instagram. Um,
You on Facebook?
yeah, not really so much on Facebook. What's that? What's the True Social? So anyway, if you search "I know Doug" or at "I know Doug," that's probably me. The social media is not really something that I'm real strong at yet, but we'll start to do that as the show starts to pick up. So I am the author of the Grow Model Food System and the webmaster for all of the .com properties and .org properties that have to do with Homestead Grown. We have 5 children, and my wife, my lovely wife Maria, is the person that you hear speaking, and she's here with me, and she will be joining us for each episode. We have 5 children. Our oldest is 14. Our second oldest is 12. Third is 9. Fourth is 6, almost 7. And fifth is 4. So we go from 4 to 14. So there's a 10-year gap there. And our second oldest is the 12-year-old is the one that we're looking to start to provide us with eggs. And um, yep. And I should
Yeah.
say that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I don't want to I don't know, jump to the next chapter on you, but we each kid sort of has their own, we're talking about our 12-year-old with chickens, but dairy goats are also on the radar, and our oldest is in charge of our water supply, and so everybody is going to be pitching in and contributing so that to make everything go a little bit smoother, and so that they can learn some of those life lessons you were talking about.
Yeah. So in the case of the oldest, he is in charge of water, and where we live, our well water is um, it's not the best, is it? uh, in fact, I think it's so filled with minerals that it's and probably not so much good stuff. So we went and bought a Berkey, and here's what we did: we bought that 6 gallon Berkey. We set him up and said, here's we're gonna supply the resources to get you off the ground, and your job is to collect water and run it through the Berkey so that we have clean filtered water, not demineralized, but healthy water, and we'll pay you. And because we're buying water anyway, right? We were buying gallons of water, and we pay essentially the same amount, maybe a little bit more than we would pay if we were purchasing the water. But it is when everything's going well, that's great, and buying water is not a big deal. But should there ever be a disruption in the supply, uh, prior to this, we would have felt the impact. But now, um, if there's a disruption in the supply, we don't really even care. Well, it's not that we don't care, but it's that we are now sourcing our water from our son, and he produces the same amount of water that we were purchasing each time, or each week, and that's what we consume. And then here's the neat thing is, so teaching him business. We then said, or I said to him, "Hey, you're in the water business. What other products could you sell us?" Now, he can't really scale his water business beyond us, but that's okay. It doesn't mean he couldn't take what he's learning from his one customer business and uh, turn that into something else. But what could you purchase, or what could you sell us that we already purchased today? So look around, and we would make lemonade, and we would make iced tea out of or could make lemonade or iced tea out of our water. We were purchasing those things. So this was an opportunity for him to expand his product set, if you will, and to add value to the water and get a greater price. So again, life lessons for the kids, but at the same time, we're paying for something that we were buying anyway. And then it puts us in a position so that if there's a disruption to the supply lines, we really aren't affected by that at all. So that's on the waterfront. Then you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned rabbits, but we did the same thing with our third oldest, and he had shown an interest in rabbits. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but rabbits produce rather quickly. So, and they're a protein source. So I know a lot of folks would be opposed to eating rabbit, my wife included. But hungry people will tend to broaden their palate, if you will. And so here we have our third oldest who is breeding rabbits, and he'll sell those rabbits to people who are looking for a bunny, but putting us in a position so that should we need to, we will already have the rabbit breeding um, skills down, and we'll be able to produce rabbits as a food source as well.
Yeah, he was so excited that he found out that just a local pet store, they didn't even care what kind of breed, um, that they would pay $20 a rabbit, um, as soon as he could provide them, the $20 a pop. And so $20 to a 9-year-old was life-changing money.
Yeah,
So he is ready to get a buck, and that's kind of a joke. He's ready to get a buck to
book.
earn a buck.
Uh,
$20. So $1 for
so we
20
share,
bucks.
yeah, and we share those examples because they're very real world examples in our household, but they um, but they could be real world examples in probably most neighborhoods. and they serve a real value. So again, we talk about hyper local. For us, that hyper local again starts with me and Maria, and then extends out to our children, so that they can uh, learn those business skills, and at the same time be responsible for contributing to the family's food supply and the family's food production. So there's a lot of time. A lot of folks may look at this and think this is really a prepper type thing. I don't know that it is, although it definitely serves the prepper need in that your ability uh, to store and have food available for an extended period of time when you are growing it yourself, raising it yourself, or sourcing it from your immediate neighbors and folks in close proximity. Um, okay, so that, Maria, am I missing anything that I wanted to? Let me go through here. Okay, so what I'm going to share is some things that I think still need to be worked out. So whenever you're dealing with other people, right, and even your own kids, it's it's good to have some type of formal agreement. I know it sounds like, hey, they're my neighbors and we've been friends and we should be able to, uh, you know, hey, I'll buy a dozen eggs a week from your kid, or if I'll buy a dozen eggs a week from you, and with a handshake and everyone's good. So I'm not suggesting we need actual contracts that are reviewed by lawyers, but there should be a written agreement, and here's why. You We want to be able to depend on this source, and since we want to be able to depend on this source and all of the sources that we'll need in order to close the gap from what we're producing ourselves, we want to make sure that we're on the same page with what we mean by one dozen a week. Because for some people, that might think you mean, well, if you have a dozen every now and again, I'll take them, or uh, maybe once a month, or if they decide they're just going to stop producing or raising chickens, that's no big deal. But they need to understand that it actually is. They are becoming they're the source of for your eggs, right? So they need to understand what that is. The only way they're really going to know that is if you've communicated that. Now, you could communicate that in word, but there's so many other things that go into that. Like I would like the eggs to be, every Saturday is when I would stop by, or they could drop by and drop off the eggs. Um, I need 2 dozen eggs every 2 weeks, or I need 1 dozen eggs on the first week, and 3 dozen eggs every week thereafter. Whatever the unique situation is, um, and including winter. So if your egg consumption is going to stay the same in winter, you should have that conversation, because uh, chickens don't produce as many eggs in winter. And in fact, at some points, they will stop producing unless the grower is using lights. And you may not want them to use lights. So, and they may not want to use lights themselves. So, those are discussions that you need to have to make sure that you're all on the same page, whether it be chickens or eggs or broilers or vegetables. If you said, hey, in exchange for my dozen eggs, I will give you, a basket of vegetables. Well, what does that mean? If you're giving them zucchini every week, that you might not have a very good relationship because if you're me, I don't ever want zucchini. I know some people love it, but I can't stand it. But so again, having a written agreement makes sure that there's no confusion about what the expectations are for either party.
Hey, can I jump in with some random thing that I learned this week?
Yep.
Um, so quail eggs. Apparently, quail lay year round and they're very consistent. They're very small eggs, though, I've learned. I don't know that I've ever given any thought to quail and quail eggs, but apparently they
It's a thing.
are good. And Tessa says that she much prefers the taste of a quail egg over a chicken egg.
Yeah, we're gonna have to try it. I didn't. I guess I knew that quail eggs was a thing. I didn't. I just never really. I've never thought much about it. I
Apparently,
didn't
they're very
realize that.
small.
Oh, I would imagine they're very small. Um,
Yeah.
so I wonder how many quail eggs it takes to meet to equal one chicken egg. Probably
I don't
three.
know.
That'd
Probably
be my
two or
guess.
three at
Maybe three.
least. Yeah.
I didn't know that they don't slow down or stop. So it doesn't matter what the season is. But I wonder what the lay rate is.
I thought she said like one a day, but you know, they're little eggs. So even if you had, six quail and six quail eggs, it's still, I mean, it's better
Two
than
eggs.
nothing through the winter.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
but
Anyway.
quail are smaller too. I wonder what the feed requirement is. But
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be something interesting to look into.
Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. What else you got?
Oh, that's it.
Oh, you said some things. I thought you were going to hit me with a whole list.
Well, eggs are some things. They're some
Gotcha.
things.
There's
Multiple
more than one
eggs.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So one other thing when it comes to the hyper local economy that I think, well, first of all, I'm pretty sure that we'll end up producing some more as we this won't be the last time we talk about this because I think we need to flush a few things out. Um, like one of them being, how do you have a fair and equitable exchange? And so let's say you reach the point where uh, you found a local source for, let's keep going with the egg thing, and you're going to in exchange for the eggs, you're going to give them zucchini. But what's a zucchini? How many eggs is a zucchini worth? Right. So there's got to be a
I
way
think it depends on who
that
you ask.
that's true. That's true. My assumption is that the zucchini is neither overly prized or detested, like it would be from me. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on the exchange list. But let's say that two parties are coming together, and one party says, "Yeah, I'll take the zucchini," and okay, in exchange for eggs. But then the question is, how many? And is it individualized? Is there a way to add a is there a formula that can be put in place so that it's fair? Again, what you don't want to do is I don't think we want to find ourselves 6 months into um, the relationship to find out that, hey, it was just a couple of zucchini. What's the big deal? If I was relying on that zucchini, if that makes sense. That makes sense. I lost you. Now, so Joey is out now getting ready to walk the dog. So, um, hi, Joey. All right, let me look through my notes here. And I have to tell you that I'm the first time back feeling a little nervous and unprepared. Okay. I guess one other thing I have here in my notes, I want to make this point that um, one of the other benefits I think to a hyper-local economy, and imagine if this was the norm, not just some, hey, we're going to experiment with this and see what we can do to make it work, but let's say this is the norm. In today's world, we make a lot of our decisions, I think, based on price point. And it makes sense. I get it. But in this country, price point has become a huge thing to the point that we you can save a lot of money in purchasing things from Amazon and from other big box locations. And I'm not anti big box per se, but I think that the consequences of relying on big box have not been good. And if you take a look at just let's hone in specifically on food, and the food that we eat today, in many cases, is based on price point. So the example I was thinking of was ramen noodles, and everyone who's gone to college knows or has an experience, I'm assuming, with ramen noodles. They're incredibly cheap, and you might fill your stomach for about 10 minutes, but in the end of the day, you get absolutely zero. And I'm probably exaggerating. There's probably some nutritional value, but the nutritional value is not good. And so we trade um, healthy fuel for our body's cells for some cheap inputs. And before you know it, the entire grocery store is filled up with boxes of cheap food that are deficient in nutrients. Whereas if you are purchasing or growing your own, and especially if you are using organic practices, then you can be sure that your food is probably very nutrient dense and very healthy for you. The side effects to the depletion or the lack of nutrition manifests in so many ways. It might not manifest in day one, but it certainly does manifest in um, um, increased doctor bills, increased medical issues, in I believe in children, in behavioral issues, in lack of energy, and these things have effects on relationships, have effects on career. So the very cheap, uh, accessible boxed foods in the end lower a quality of life. And I'm not sure how you can put a price on that. So I want to make that clear that I think that there's value in putting in the energy either to produce it yourself or to source it from someone who does produce it in a way that is healthy and clean. Okay, so I see Mike. Welcome, Mike. 3 to 4 quail eggs equal a chicken egg. Yep, that makes about sense. That makes sense. Um, and you say they taste like very similar to chicken eggs, which would make sense because everything tastes like chicken, right? That's a common thing, so that would make sense. All right. So, Maria, do you have anything in closing that you'd like to share?
I can't think of anything. I'm also sort of intermittently fielding kid interruptions, so I have not been as focused as I wish I could have been.
Ah,
So I apologize.
yeah, that's okay. So, has the sound quality been okay throughout?
I definitely heard Joey uh, clunking around and putting the leash down and slamming doors, but
Okay.
I mean, but you've sounded good. I mean, I think it sounds pretty clear.
Okay. Well, great. Well, again, we're just getting off the ground. The hyperlocal economies is one of 4 components that are featured in the Grow Model Food System. And just to summarize those again, it is the plan and production. So in the plan, it is the detailed listing of analyzing what it is that you currently eat today, what it is that you'll eat in the future, ingredient mining, so that you know what it is that you would need from an ingredient perspective to produce all of your own food for a year, or produce or source all of your own food for a year. And then takes you through the exercise of determining what it is that you will produce initially, and that should grow as the years go on. But what you will grow or produce initially, and then what you will source, where you will source it, and agreements to source, and then that's the second component is the hyperlocal economy component, which is sourcing, and then the third is gardening, and the fourth is animal husbandry. So you don't need to be a gardener, but you'll learn gardening, and you don't need to know how to take care of animals, but you will learn to take care of animals. And uh, those 4 components, if executed, you'll be in a position to provide food and have food stored and grow in season as best you can, and utilizing different gardening techniques to extend the season, even into hydroponic and aquaponics, so that you can have fresh vegetables in winter, even if you're in the northern states. So that's where this hyperlocal economies fits in. It's one component within the four, and we'll be talking about all four of those components, at least one of those each week. And we think Saturdays is where we're going to land, but we could land on Fridays. But we thank you for joining us this evening, and hopefully you will come back next week. 9 o'clock Saturday is what we're going to plan, and if we change that to Friday, then we'll let you know. But look forward to seeing you all Saturday, 9 p.m. next week. Thanks.
Good night.